Anyway, can you please very quickly introduce your talk? I think everybody knows who you are, but for those who are new to the D community, who aren't regulars, who don't know you, maybe I know you do it in the video also, but just say a few words now, please.
Yes, so I use D at work, which I will mention in the talk. This talk is all only looking at my code and extracting certain useful pieces that I used in the code. I just wanted to share what is there. And let me take this opportunity to tell everyone that making a talk is as simple as that, or coming up with an idea for a talk is as simple as the way you use D. Just look at your code and it makes a presentation like this. It's hard work to make this slides later on, of course, but coming up with an idea is as simple as that.
So, Ali, this talk is related to your DConf 2019 talk where you first told us about the, what do you call them, ROS bag? Yeah, there we go, ROS bag file manipulation.
Yes.
How did you wind up with Mercedes-Benz research and development?
Well, through connections, let's say, I went to a local C++ meetup, mentioned that I was looking for a job, and somebody there raised their hand. They said they were looking for someone. Yeah, on the C++ meetup, local meetup, I found the team. Immediately, the ROS bag file format and the problem they were facing interested me, and I volunteered, and I had a lot of fun writing D in that tool set.
How many of your colleagues have you turned on to the,
Let's say a handful have been exposed to certain features of D, and they completely agree. And recently, I cannot announce it yet because it's not guaranteed. Some other teams got interested, and they decided let's better look at this language and let's rewrite what we've been doing in D. And they will use me as the seed of D at the organization. And we may see more D replacing mainly Python in this case.
well, in
Uh,
your, I'm sorry, do you have more?
just to say it up front, it cannot replace C++ when it comes to autonomous driving side
Hmm.
because you need certifications for anything that you use in that safety critical application, and only C++ is certified
Hmm.
um, as a language with its standards. So D cannot come in unless it's certified.
Well, in your engineering with D slide here, you say that D involves few bugs, is very productive, and is a lot of fun. Now, I think we can all agree as D programmers with all of those. But I mean,
Yes.
that's one of the reasons I stuck with D for so long is because it's fun. But how do you sell that to other people? I mean, fun is usually not a requirement for a language if you're a CTO.
I realize that, and also, but I realize that fun equals productivity, maybe linearly or maybe even a power law. If you're dreading writing something, oh, I don't want to write that thing once again with fighting this language feature or not, you're not going to be productive. Pulling the age card, I have 30 plus years in software industry
Old
out
man.
of college, old man. So I had a stagnation in my interest in programming during my career. But as soon as I saw D, and I mentioned it in the talk, Andre's The Case for D article, it just changed. I'm very much excited in programming again. And I secretly wait for requirements from people to mold my code, change it to the requirement. And it's surprising how things work. I don't know whether it's my experience or whether it's the language itself. I can't be sure of it at this time. But it's an fun exercise to change the code to accept new requirements. And it's not in a, let me give you an anecdote of my hardware ASIC designer friend, where I used to work at. He would say, Ali, why is it that when I need something from an ASIC designer, from a hardware engineer, I go to them and say, hey, we need this. Can you implement it? And they just jump in and right away do it. But when I go to a software person and I ask, can we implement this? They're always, oh, I don't know. Can we push it back? Can we do it some other way? So there's this resistance to change. I see this less in D. And again, I mentioned in my talk, Liran Zvibel and Leith Ishark have been talking about the same thing, where they just write it as prototype language, and it's so easy to mold it to your production style in the end.
And we're getting some agreement here with the fun factor in the live stream chat, but also Mathis brings up an interesting point about unit tests. You were talking about unit test pragmatism on the previous slide in the
Yes,
talk here. And one of the things that I guess Funkwerk has issues with is they don't have uh, test suites and I mean fixtures, mocks, fakes, and all that. So it's not built in, and they've got to do all this other plumbing on top of it. What?
I agree. Yeah, I agree. And that's what I actually underline on that slide. Completely agreed. But even without those, this little piece of one step, and I acknowledge Walter's earlier comments, just this little stupid step forward enables so much for so many people. I'm not saying don't put mocks and fakes, whatever in the system, eventually they may show up. But my point there is you don't need a complete something to be so useful. I still find unit test itself to be an education for me.
And we're currently looking at the range pragmatism slide.
Yes.
How much functional experience did you have before we started getting functional support in D?
I came from C++ and whatever that language provided, but I knew a functional programming style could be done in any language, including C. So that was my exposure.
So was
Yeah.
it? I've got a clarification from Mathis here. He was kind of making a joke that
Uh-huh.
Funkwerk is doing exactly the opposite. They're using unit tests in exactly the opposite way that you mentioned. But the fact that it's a language strength that they're able to do that. That's the point
Oh,
he's
good.
making. So I misunderstood him.
At least we agree on something.
Yeah, it's a language strength. So yeah, but did you have any difficulty picking up ranges when we first got them?
Oh, not at all. I'm lucky because when the range concept first appeared on C++ forums years and years ago, and if you remember, Walter Bright dug up some old emails where it also showed up on D forums. So the concept of a range popped up on both C++ forums and D forums, and I was on the C++ side, complang C++ moderated. I remember that idea, but we were, C++ people were all tied to the idea of iterators back then. And I remember reading articles proving, and that's on my range pragmatism slide, proving that iterators are provide more abstraction. So the community was like, "Wow, iterators are so good. STL is so good," and we stayed there. But because maybe that seed was in my mind from those years, we're all humans, and I feel close to Andrei, the way he presents his thoughts or the way he thinks, probably. So it was easy sell from his article on ranges and everything that this was a great idea. And once you realize that you need to put the begin and end together to be able to chain functionality algorithms together, no, I had no difficulty with ranges.
Every time I watch your talks or read your writing, I always pick up some little tidbit that I wasn't aware of before or that I hadn't considered. And something I'd never looked at before, your thoughts on format string literals.
Yeah, I was shocked on how much of these I used in my code. I have 550 of them in, yeah, I just gave the statistics. Said, yeah, amazing.
Yeah, and I never would have, the way you presented it here that it should be a bug, I never would have thought of it that way. Yeah. But does this come from experience of your usage at the company or just as your own experimentation with the language, or where do you derive this
From,
this kind of insight?
oh, because you write an error message, you want to display something on screen, and the writing of the error message fails. Format throws an exception saying, hey, you don't have enough arguments for this %s. So you realize, wait a minute, most of these format strings are related to error reporting. So I need to guard myself from errors in error reporting itself. So that's where it comes from. And C and C++ does not have this facility, but their compilers have these built-in added functionality to guard against this. So it just makes sense.
Well, I guess in general, do you tend to go down rabbit holes in your own usage of D and discover? Because I know when you were doing research for your book, you were exploring a lot of corners that you had never explored before. So, I mean, I guess what I'm asking is that how you get most of your insights about D, or do you get it just through normal usage?
No, I'm just a user, I think. The book probably helped me understand the corners because you say something in a paragraph. Oh, even this presentation, I said many things, but I said, wait a minute, is it really true? And I had to go in and test and look for it a little more, like the error management thing here. That's one of the most important points to me these days. And both of my presentations today and tomorrow will touch on that. And interestingly, Walter today touched on error management, and he said exceptions will probably disappear. Kind of either contradicts my having to use it, or maybe I support him because of the problems in that area. So yes, whatever I say or do, it requires you to go in and prove something, not to embarrass yourself. And that's one way of learning, I guess.
What kind of stuff are you doing on the side outside of work with D?
Oh, very little. It used to be the book. It was a big time. Most of my time was on the book, it used to be, but now I put it aside. Even though I feel guilty about that because there are certain things I need to correct. The main thing is I need to rip out the post-bullet area and replace it with copy constructors. So that's the way forward for D now. I feel bad about still keeping it in the book. Related to D, no, I don't do much. My current family situation, raising my child, COVID-19, stay at home, doesn't give me much time on in the house in addition to my work, which I do remotely, not these days. But I've contributed to Phobos a little bit, tiny little pieces. And this work actually, not this work, but my work at Mercedes-Benz Research and Development shown a limitation of merge range algorithm, which I would like to improve in Phobos. Merge can work with any number of ranges, and it ranges them in a merge sort fashion. You give multiple ranges to merge, and merge will give you a range output in a sorted fashion. But the number of arguments must be compile time known in the current Phobos implementation. In my case, I didn't know, so I couldn't use Phobos merge. That's one thing I would like to just improve.
Attila remarked that he learned about D as well, writing his talk for this conference, specifically the binary layout for classes.
It's free in D, right? The compiler can do it in any way. Maybe that's why I didn't even care to look at it myself. But structs, I'm so happy the binary layout of structs are one-to-one with C ABI.
Okay, here's a question, I guess it's for you. Can merge, or I don't know if it's just a general question for everybody, but can merge respect AA style containers, ranges?
Merging associative arrays is also missing. I had to do it explicitly in a loop myself. If the question is that, I agree. But I don't think, it should be. We should be able to do it. Let me answer a question. Matt asks, appender is preferred to just building an array with tilde? And my answer will be yes. Appender uses better optimized algorithm.
And Matt,
And I don't really know why, but Steven Schweighofer convinced me at some point appender knows it.
okay, Walter says Appender has more information. That's why it can be more efficient.
Great, great.
Steve says Appender knows the capacity without having to call opaque functions to know whether it can just add more data to the array, so it's much quicker if no reallocation is needed.
Yes. I think it's because slices share the same memory, but only one slice can expand it. All the others must respect no stump guarantee. So Appender owns its own memory, probably, yeah. Oh, and decimal place separator is on the slide now. So useful. Everybody should use this. Otherwise, I'm looking at these gigabyte long files in LS on a Linux terminal. I don't know, is it a 1 gigabyte or 10 gigabyte? I need to count. I know there are options to tell LS to be more helpful, but this should be the default, I think. And the last example I give on this decimal place separator is useful for hexadecimal if you want to separate 2 digits.
Okay, now I think this when you sent this video to me and I was reviewing it before we edited it, I think it occurred to me this is the first presentation I've seen on standard parallelism, I think, that I can recall. I haven't seen anybody talk about it at DConf. I don't know of any tutorials out there about it or blog posts about
Oh,
it, and this is the first bit of
yeah.
shared knowledge that I've
Um,
seen of this. What prompted you to include it?
Actually, I used parallelism. Um, First of all, as I underlined strongly on the talk, parallelism is the most impressive part of Phobos for me. It's amazing. You just say dot parallel and you get a boost. Your loop runs amazing. And it's impressive because you could have written it. The language allows you, gives you the power to do that. So because I've been impressed, I included it in some of my presentations, local small ones, or even I included it on C++ Now conference. Must be 2017 now. I forgot the year. So it appeared, but here I just wanted to make it more available. You know, it's so simple. You can do this. And there's only one gotcha that you should be aware of. And the bug is on the slide right now. That's all. Okay. Matt is asking, what has the reception of D been like at Mercedes? I'm answering, they accepted it just fine as long as it just worked. And I really appreciate the way the project accepted both the Mercedes-Benz Daimler side and the Bosch side. They were just, well, just give me a tool that's useful. I don't care in what language you wrote it.
That's an interesting question about how people accept it. I know here in Korea, I've had a chance to, regularly go inside this company here in Korea using D BPF Korea, but I go in not as a D programmer, but as an English teacher, teaching their D programmers
Mhm.
to improve their English. They've recruited not just local Koreans, but they've also recruited globally. They've got some Europeans in there and Americans, and with the exception of Matthias Lang and Andrei Mitrovic, none of them had any exposure to D before, but they all picked it up very easily. They all had C++ and
Mhm.
Java experience, and so they got hired and they got on the job and they picked it up. And it did take a couple of them a little bit of a adjustment period, but once they got the hang of it, it was no big deal. But this
Yeah,
isn't a
we've
case.
seen this.
This isn't a case of selling
We,
a language. This is a case of training.
yeah, talking about how this project between Daimler and Bosch accepted D. I'm really, I appreciate the way the project um, really accepted it. Just open-minded people. I guess there was a proof of concept solution written in D, almost complete. There were other competing C++, Python, and yeah, other solutions. They looked at it and said D is more complete, and this one just works. Why be? Why insist on something? And they just accepted it. And going a little bit with the point you raised, I used to work at WECA, and WECA would interview in C++, their employees, but tell them, of course, yes, we're interviewing you for C++, but you will be writing in D. And with the exception of one person out of about 40 developers, they were all just fine, and most of them liked it. One of those developers, I had the chance of working again later on at an unrelated startup company. Even though the startup company CTO would have liked to use C++, that other developer who used to be C++ and worked with D brought D with him to the project. He said, why are we wasting our time? D is competitive, gives you a competitive advantage, let's say. Just use it in D, and he brought it there. So it's easy, in my experience too, for C++ people to get into D.
Here's one for you. How do you describe D to people? I often have to resort to it's a bit like C++, which is obviously not the whole truth, as they feel very different.
So difficult, yeah. People are looking for something, some killer app, killer company, killer feature, one thing, and we don't have that. So the way I sell is productivity. It makes you more productive. It gives you a competitive edge. And I think that should be a good selling point.
I always
Yeah.
t-
Um,
I always
yeah.
tell people it's like the child of Java and C++, or Java and C rather, because
Oh,
all of my experience before D was within C and Java, And I was always frustrated when I was using one that I couldn't have what I was used to in the other one. And then when I got into D, it kind of fit the best of both worlds for me there.
I had to present D to a smaller team recently. And because I come from C and C++ background, and because the main language is C++ in the project, I always come from that angle. And one of my colleagues said, D is very similar to C# for that person, because he likes C# and he saw many commonalities there. Okay, I agree with that too. C# is also a common language where people find similarities with.
Robert Shattuck just said something similar to what I said, but where I have the traditional two languages, he has three going on here. D is what you get when the good parts of C++, Python, Haskell have a love child.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've never used Haskell, so I can't comment on that.
Me neither, but I remember Andrei's article, or actually Haskell people's own criticism of not being able to write. I think Andrei mentioned quicksort, because if a language is so adamant of no mutation, but quicksort happens to be a in-place mutating algorithm, you need to allocate a lot, I think. But Haskell had improvements since then because other people refuted Andrei's criticism. So I don't know enough to say, but at least at some point it has these, what are we doing? It's so difficult to do certain things, or too not optimized enough. But I don't know enough to be sure.
Well, I want to get back onto your talk. I'm now looking at the slides. You're talking about standard concurrency here. And my impression is that std.parallelism and std.concurrency are probably a couple of the least exercised areas of Phobos. That's the impression I get, because I just don't see I don't see it being used so much in the projects I look at or in discussions in the forum. So have you found issues using these packages in your code?
I can't really call anything with parallelism an issue. Maybe I made those bugs myself to learn. It's so simple, slap it there, you gain performance. I compile, so my workstation has 22 cores. I've been on a very much fun recent project where I added on-demand compilation. I run DMD at runtime as needed to generate these shared libraries to link with the application, and it works awesome. Because I have 22 cores, I just compile 1,300 D files, and it finishes in 2 times or so with parallel. If I didn't have that, I think I didn't really measure, but I've seen 40 plus minutes at some point. So it's a huge difference. So parallel is just awesome. Concurrency is considerably more complicated. And you can, because there is, even though message passing is the safe way, simple way of using concurrency, you can still find yourself in these situations. My thread disappeared, what happened? Or you can get into these communication problems. One thread sending a message, the other one not receiving it, not because of Phobos, but because of your algorithms. You need to run a state machine on your own to keep these threads communicate with each other successfully. And my slides are for that. Considerably more difficult, but if you follow some guidelines, it's also a very, very much useful feature, which I, again, as I say, I use in my code.
Okay, what I was going to say about that is, you look at the Java world. I mean, concurrency is part of the bread and butter of Java. And you have the classic book, Java Concurrency, I think it's the title, the O'Reilly, Brian Getz, what's his name? I know people are still referring to that book today, but it was written in, 2004 or 5, I don't know, several years ago. We have nothing, we don't have that wealth of knowledge in D about the concurrent features. And that, I think, is an issue. Have you felt blind going into these modules and using these features, or has it been intuitive?
Well, the modules hide the complexity from you, which is wonderful, but it also leaves some questions behind, which I did not seek answers for. For example, task stealing message queues are known to be one of the most performant. I had watched presentations C++ in the C++ language by Sean Parent, probably from his Better Code or some series like that. If you watch one of his presentations, he explains how he started with some simple naive way of doing queue with multiple threads, and he intentionally locks the queue at the inopportune bad moments, and then he improves the design, but he cannot get the performance that he gets from some other library. Why? And it turns out to be task stealing is the key. So to this day, because I didn't research, I don't know whether D's concurrency module uses task stealing or not. Perhaps not, because we don't have a message sharing concurrency. So that might be a good addition as well. But I'm not an expert on concurrency either. These are all bits and pieces of knowledge I gathered along my journey in programming, let's say.
Well, what do you see for the future of D at your company?
Too early to say. As I said, there is hope for more D by more programmers. Too early to say in this company. But also looking at other companies, Remedy Games comes to mind. Manu and Ethan used D, and they were the person who kept it alive. As they left, we think it's not there anymore. So given that, probably not. You know, as long as I am around, these tools will live. But at the same time, my colleagues also read Netflix's data science, or there's that ad company in San Francisco, their data science use of D by the same lead person, Benoit, a French guy, I think. So my colleagues are excited because we do data science too. Maybe if Netflix and others use D for data science, maybe we can take advantage of it too. And there was a very recent very recent GitHub article where people compared Mir and other frameworks and found it to be faster than Python. So if you're replacing Python, why not? But sorry, I'm not able to give you a clear answer.
Oh, no, nobody can
Yeah.
give an accurate answer on the future. I was
Yeah.
just wondering your prediction. But we have another question here in the Premier chat. Is there this is from Matt again. Is there a performance cost of putting the delegate within the loop? I guess he's talking about your delegate slide.
Delegate
Nested functions.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a cost in the loop itself. So does it reallocate the context for the delegate for every iteration? I don't know. Does it or does it not? There is that famous bug where the loop counter can be shared, but I did not see it in this in the parallelism slide.
Okay, so we got a couple other people throwing in here. Mathis Beer saying it may force closure allocation, I think. And Auburn Sounds, that's Guillaume. He's saying if this is a delegate with a closure, the cost is at the creation freeing of that closure. Calling a delegate is like calling a function plus one pointer arg.
Calling is cheap, but
being in the
will
loop,
it create at every iteration, I wonder?
That's the question.
I think that's what they're saying. They're saying yes.
Well, somebody's going to try it for us. Mathis Beer's going to try it for us.
Nice. But the thing is, the beauty is you can just choose some style that's the simplest, go with it, and then profile, and then change it later on. Okay, good question. This is why we're system programmers. Programmers just know what's happening. But
okay. Look at that, Walter. Walter answered, yes, it is. It's allocated at every iteration.
All right. Nothing is free.
Now we know. Okay, here's an interesting thought. Guillaume says he thinks you can no GC delegate to forcefully avoid a closure.
I agree. They are saying on the chat, on the YouTube channel, that so better to pass a parameter, I suppose. Yes, they are right. But I would have hoped maybe the delegate could do that. You know, a nested function there could realize the context is not being used by the delegate elsewhere. Let me ask Walter. I'm asking him whether the delegate can be optimized to pass parameters
Okay, and
instead.
I've got a question for you from the live stream chat when you're finished with that, when you're
Mhm.
ready.
Yes,
Okay,
ready.
if given the chance, what would you change or add into D?
Apparent from my forum contributions to DIP, I don't comment on much of them. I don't have my pet peeves. I think I've resolved into some personality where I really don't care. You know, it can be that way or this way too. Maybe I'm not aware of some deal-breaking, horrible feature. Walter's at live is very promising if it comes up. Yeah, I'm sorry to be so quiet on this one, not having an opinion, but that's how it is.
Yeah, I'm mostly ambivalent to new language features myself. They come and I either use them or I don't, but I'm not passionate about them either way. So I'm kind of with you on
Yeah,
that.
that's the thing.
Um,
Passion is the word here for me for
a-
some reason.
and I have we have something here in the chat from Walter back on the delegate thing about the loops, where Matt says so it's better to pass a parameter, I suppose, and you said Walter, can delegates be optimized to pass parameters instead? Walter says just use a function pointer, or you could use a struct member function, and the context will be the struct instance wherever that
Hmm.
is. So you can get your context on the stack without allocating any.
But it's
Or if
not
it's
as
already on the heap,
convenient
I mean,
as,
if it's already on the heap, you can get it without any new allocations.
okay, I wrote, it's not as convenient as a nested function. Maybe it can be. I think it should be
Well, I think it
able to
sounds to me like we're
optimize.
actually discussing a feature here that you would like to see added to the
Uh-huh,
language.
uh-huh.
Hey,
Yes.
there you go. There's an
Oh,
answer to your
yes.
question in the live stream.
Yes, there is one more thing actually. This reminded me. Other people asked during my past talks whether we could have no cost, no stack allocation fibers. Fibers by default allocate some memory, lazily or not, but you would like to say this fiber doesn't use any stack, just a small little function thingy, or maybe you can, yeah, that's what people wanted: cheaper, faster fibers. But again, fibers are that third thing in addition to parallelism and concurrency that people seem not to use much. We don't see it talked much, and as you say, we need some collective understanding of these things better. I'm reading Walter's answer. He says delegates and non-static member functions are interchangeable. Okay, he's looking from a different angle. A nested function. He doesn't see the convenience of writing a nested function and just passing a few of the parameters to this one, but it collects the other parameters from the context for that immediate use. I think is convenient. Okay, this is something I will talk with him.
Okay, well, Ali's gone. We've got a question here in the live stream about ref. Why is the ref keyword only usable in function parameters and for loops? Walter made the decision a long time ago not to include reference variables in D, but I don't remember what that was. If somebody else in the chat more knowledgeable than I may be able to answer. Yeah, we have a. Do you remember why Walter didn't include reference variables in D?
Error prone is what I've heard.
Uh,
You can find other error prone use cases for other features, but both Andre and Walter were completely against reference variables.
hmm.
I'm going to
Oh,
ask that question here. Sorry to interrupt you. So
okay.
nested functions are so convenient. I pass in
Yes.
one argument, but it uses 5 arguments from the context. Does it
Right.
have to? Does it have to allocate a context, or can that nested function determine that my context is not going to be used later on, and convert those arguments into function parameters and use it as a static nested function automatically? Because convenience is, it's very convenient to use a nested function.
All right. Well, what the compiler does do is if it can determine that the delegate does not escape the stack frame, it doesn't allocate a closure with the GC. It's just another indirect reference to the stack.
Oh, perfect. So that answers the question, Mike. It does not allocate.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Okay.
what you can help with that by, if you're passing it, you pass it as a scope parameter. And that the scope parameter ensures that it doesn't escape the function you're calling, which means the stack frame is always going to be active while the delegate is active, and so no dynamically allocated closure is necessary.
Okay,
So that's the trick.
so that's what I missed in my presentation then. See, Mike, I learned.
Yeah, we all
I should
did.
have learned this
We all did.
earlier.
No,
Yeah,
it's good.
awesome.
Yeah, we all did. Is this a question for Ali? Static immutable X versus enum X. I don't know about their runtime trade-offs.
At runtime, Walter is here too. He can answer too. But at runtime, there shouldn't be any difference except for arrays and associative arrays, where enum can be very expensive, because enum, an array defined as enum, will be copy pasted into places where that array is used. And copy paste means putting that literal expression down there, and which means at every use there will be an allocation at every use. So that's expensive. For arrays and associative arrays, no enum. For others, I don't think there's any runtime cost at all. Walter, any runtime cost for enum versus immutable?
Well, it kind of depends on how you use it. Enum is just kind of, like you said, just a way to refer to a literal. It's like in C, you went hash define A as being 3, okay? And it all kind of depends on how you use it, if storage is allocated for it or not. Immutables are not necessarily allocated in static storage either. You can go immutable x equals 3, and it's actually going to be allocated on the stack and initialized, as opposed to being a static variable, which is stored in the static data segment. But if you went enum, there's no storage allocated for it at all.
Yes. So runtime cost is the
use
allocation itself. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have multiple options based on how you're going to be using it. But it's convenient to think of enum like it, if you're familiar with C and C++, that it's a macro. It just does a substitution at the point where you're referring to the enum symbol. So enums do not allocate memory.
But they do for arrays. And
Only when you
that
use
copy
it.
paste. Yes. When you use it, of course. Okay.
There's no memory allocated for it. It's a strictly compile time creature when it is not used. And when it is used, it's a copy is made of it. And you can tell that because if you take an enum initialized array and then you change one of the values in the array, the enum is not affected.
Of course.
Because a copy was made. It may look like you're changing the value of the enum, but you're not. You're changing the value in a copy of the enum. Now, if you made an immutable array thing, the compiler won't let you change a member of the array because it's immutable. There is no copy of it. You're all referring to the same thing, so it's not going to let you change it.
Okay, Ali, here's another question for your opinion on an issue here. In regards to Phobos, the standard library, do you think it should grow and include more and more high-level stuff, or should it be kept minimal and the high-level stuff be external?
Because they are asking my opinion, and I think I'm a special person when we look at the programming landscape these days, where everybody has these, including DOB. So many organizations are okay with including everything, importing everything from GitHub automatically as they need. In my use in the company, I don't have any outside dependency other than Phobos. So which means I would like Phobos to be more useful, but it's my personal opinion.
Here's a question for you, Ali. What kind of library and language additions would help your work?
JSON, I had to go around it. I just wrote everything using Phobos and a few additions myself. JSON lacked features, and I know it's slower too, but slowness did not bother me because I parsed JSON at the beginning of the application, but it lacked certain usability features, which I wrapped JSON to fix. Get-opt, these are all command tools. That's why I'm thinking from that point of view. Get-opt also has some finicky, it has a bug. So when you specify your command line arguments, you can have a long name, bar, and a short name. Short name need not be a single letter. You can have multiple characters for the short name. But when you look for the help screen, it puts as if you can use a single dash. It shows you a dash dash long name or dash short name. That doesn't work. It should be dash dash short name. So that bug I just covered, I call a bug. It might be a feature.
All right, here's another question. What's your favorite language feature that should probably be removed? Well, it's like I know in the writing world they talk about killing your darlings, you know, when you're editing. So which of your darlings in D would you kill?
Oh, the shared attribute or const. You know, turtles all the way down. I find myself cast away const or not put const at all. I find myself in these weird trapped situations. It feels a little too strict. Even though I agree with Walter why it has to be turtles all the way down, certain things don't work, like ranges don't work with const. They should be mutated. Oh, copy. Okay, there are certain cases where copying an object from a const also gives you a const, which need not be. So there are these either bugs, I haven't investigated further, but usability problems with this strictness are in the language, which I would like to fix, let's say.
All right, const is awesome. That's not a question, but I think Attila, I know that was Attila, by the way, and we know how he feels about const.
Yeah, I know.
Ali, have you had a look at Mir Algorithm.libmir.org? I think it's an awesome library written in the spirit of std.range and std.algorithm, but with specific focus on NoGC, Better C, and C++ interop.
I'm aware of Mir. I did not put any time in investigating or using it, experimenting with it, no.
Next question. Ali, do you use only D features for testing or some other libraries? Do you use other libraries for testing or just D features? I guess, are you just using unittest and assert, or are you using any other libraries?
Only unittest in my D code. No, we don't have any other framework for testing. At one point, because you don't want to interact with the file system, I abstracted away a file object to being an in-memory object. So I have two versions of it, actual file versus a file in memory. I think the operating system or libraries have facilities for the same, but I just wrote it myself. In unittest, I provide a memory version of a file, and that unittest uses it. So that's been my extension of the unit tests by adding an in-memory file object.
All right. Ali, thank you. Thank you for sharing your time. And I know you'll be back tomorrow for your second talk, you overachiever. And
Thank you very much, guys.
Have a good day, man.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.